So no matter where you live, over the last few months and years, you've likely noticed the increase in the cost of living. Pretty much everything you buy is more expensive. Everything from cars to groceries to homes, that price has just continued to increase, and unfortunately Florida is no different. But when you actually look at the national average of the cost of living, when you compare Florida to all the other states, we are just barely over the national average at 102.8 when the average is 100. And then within the state of Florida, it can really vary because a place like where I live here in Gainesville, we're actually 8% below the national average on the cost of living scale. Now, when we're talking about Florida, in addition to the beautiful weather, one of the major things that draws people into the state is going to be the fact that Florida does not have a state income tax, which is a huge benefit, especially if you're coming from a high tax state like California or some of these other areas. One thing that you do want to keep in mind is that Florida does have a sales tax. Across the state, there is a 6% sales tax, and then within each county, that number can vary a little bit. Again, here in Gainesville, Alachua County, the sales tax is actually 7.5%, but if you go over to a place like Orlando, it's only 6.5%. So you can expect a baseline sales tax of 6% and then a potential increase of 1% or 1.5%. So when it comes to cost of living, one of the real tangible examples you could look at is going to be gas prices. Take a look at this AAA map. You'll see that the prices can range dramatically. So if you go down towards South Florida and some of the bigger cities in Florida, those places traditionally will have higher priced gas than North Central Florida and the Panhandle. So property taxes can be another hot button topic when it comes to cost of living. Of course, it's going to range across the board. And one thing that I found when doing the research for this topic was a lot of the calculators and information out there is actually really far off. So Florida's average real property tax rate is just under 1% at 0.98. Now the national average is actually 1.08%. But then if you look at a place like Gainesville, again in Alachua County, our property tax rate is 1.18%. So it's on the high side for the entire state. So when I mentioned some of the information out there is incorrect and some of the calculators can be a little confusing, let me give you a real life example. So let's look at an example of a home with an assessed value of $260,000. We'll take the tax rate in Alachua County of 1.18% and we'll end up with a yearly tax amount just over $3,000. But here, if you look at an actual real life example of a home with that same assessed value, the actual taxes that they're paying per year are closer to $5,000. And that's because a lot of these online calculators and online information don't take into account for all of the local taxes and special assessments that have been voted on and passed in these different counties. Now that leads us right into home prices. Currently, the median sold price across the country for the nation is $385,000. Here in the state of Florida, that same median home price is going to be $382,000. But then if you look at a place like Gainesville, the median sold price is $365,000. So of course, when it comes to real estate, home prices can range dramatically and they are hyper local. So if you're looking in different areas, you really want to connect with someone on the ground that can give you accurate information, because using medians and averages is not always going to be the best option. Now, when it comes to rental properties, Florida's median rental price for a 2-bedroom unit is going to be about $1,500. That is 27% higher than the national average at $1,200 for the same 2-bedroom unit. Now, specific examples are always going to be more useful than national averages and median. So if you were looking for a 2-bedroom apartment here in Gainesville, Florida, you could expect to pay anywhere from about $1,400 on up to $2,000 a month, depending on the exact location, if you're right next to campus, or if there's any additional amenities. One thing that you definitely want to keep in mind if you're looking for apartments and rentals is going to be the pricing. Especially here in Gainesville with so many college apartments, a lot of the prices are actually listed per bedroom, not per unit. So make sure you keep a close eye on that. Now, whether you're renting or buying, another major expense that you're going to want to consider if you're relocating is going to be the utility cost. Of course, across the state, utilities will range dramatically, but here in Gainesville, the utility cost is actually 56% higher than the national average. But if you go over to a place like Tallahassee, their utility cost is actually 13% below the national average. So with a utility rate 56% higher than the national average, you can imagine this is a very sensitive topic to everyone who lives here in Gainesville and who's planning to move. Gainesville Regional Utilities, the local utility company, has already come out and publicly said over the next 4 or 5 years, they're anticipating increasing rates each year from 3 to 5%. And that's something you need to plan for moving forward. So as an example, I'll share what we're looking at utilities. We've got about a 2,500 square foot house. We keep the AC around the mid 70s, and typically our bill without water or wastewater will range from about $200 to about $300 a month. And if you've got children, especially young ones, another major expense that you may need to consider is going to be daycare. Here in Gainesville, if you've got anywhere from an infant to 1-year-old, you can expect that daycare to cost about $1,000 a month. Once the child turns 5 years old, they are eligible for the VPK program, which is basically a part-time pre-kindergarten program. So now that you have a little bit better feel for the cost of living here in Florida, if you're looking for more specifics and hard numbers, what you'll want to do next is go ahead and watch this video where I break down the home cost and what you can expect to get for your money here in Gainesville, Florida.